Hey YouTubers, Linda here. I want to talk to you tonight about provision from God, because I want to do this message because I know a lot of people right now are out of work. I know a lot of people are in financial need, and there's a lot of confusion about how they can help themselves, because there are a lot of areas of the country where there just aren't jobs. There's not employment available. And what's coming in the world is, from the spiritual side, is the world systems are going to begin to fail us. And what we have to do is we have to learn to rely on God's system and rely on Him for all of our provision, because the time is coming when nothing else is going to work. So I have been... I'm going to teach you on something that I've been doing myself for 13 years, which is tithing. And the tithe is not always a popular subject. Some people say, well, that's Old Testament, we don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. It's a personal choice. I've tried it both ways. I've tried tithing and I've tried not tithing. And I've seen a big difference. It's up to you which one you want to do. My message is just to share what I've seen. The scripture that's about tithing is found in Malachi chapter 3. And God talks, and what the tithe is, if you use the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, you look up the word tithe, you go back to the original language, it means 1/10. In the Old Testament, when God was handing down the law to Moses, He required the priests to give 1/10 of their tenth. All the people tithed 1/10 to the tribe that was the priest's tribe, and then the priests were required to give 1/10 out of all that they had gotten. And what the tithe does is it provides money for God's work to be done. Where you tithe is a personal choice, and that is something that you should seek God about. It's not necessarily your local church. It may be. It's generally wherever you're fed. That's just my opinion. But you should seek the Holy Spirit about that for guidance. Don't take anyone else's word for it. Malachi chapter 3 verse 8 says, "Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. For ye say, Wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts." It's the only place in the Bible where God says, "Prove me." So that's very important. He said, "If I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. And he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vines cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts." What the tithe does is, if you give 1/10, it consecrates the other 90%, the other 9/10 of what you have left, and enables God to bless it. He rebukes the devourer, which means your things aren't breaking down all the time, your car's not breaking down all the time. What the tithe promises, the promise of the tithe is that all your needs are going to be met. And all the time that I have tithed, and I've been out of work many times, I have never once not had what I needed when I was tithing. When I lived in Dallas prior to right now, I was out of work at least 4 times in a 4-year period. And at least 2 of those times had absolutely no income coming in whatsoever. My rent was over $700 a month. I had a truck payment that was $500 a month, and other expenses. And not once I wasn't even late on anything, because God brought me the money to pay those things. Because I believed Him, and I put my faith out there, and I said, "Father, I have tithed, and I claim the power of the tithe, and I ask you to bring me money to pay these, whatever the obligations were." There was one time, and I have many stories of provision, but I'll probably have to make a second video to tell you those, but there was once when I had been out of work for, I don't remember, 3 or 4 months, something like that, and I had no money, and I counted up my bills, and I needed like $1,200 to pay what I had to pay, and it was coming up for rent time, and it was about 3 days from rent time. I had about $60 in my checking account. And so I prayed, and I asked the Lord. I said, "Okay," I said, "I know I tithe, and I tithe on everything I get, so I know I have a right to ask for this." And I said, "I'm going to make an offering. An offering is different than a tithe, by the way. I'm going to make an offering, and I'm going to offer $12, and you tell me which ministry you want me to pay it to, and I'm going to believe you for a 100-fold return, because I need $1,200 in 3 days. I had no place else to turn for help. My family didn't have money. I had no place else to ask for help. I was going to be in the street. So I wrote the check for the $12. I prayed. I believed God showed me the ministry to tithe that, or to make that offering into. I drove to the post office. I prayed over it again, dropped it in the box, and went on about my business. The Lord spoke to me, and He told me. He said, He showed me in my spirit a specific friend. He said, I want you to go help her. She's trying to build her business, and I want you to go help her, and I want you to plant that as a seed. I said, fine. So I called her up. And sure enough, she needed some marketing help, which was something that I kind of had a knack for. And so I drove to help her that evening. I drove after hours and went to her office to help her design a marketing project. And we worked and worked and worked and worked for hours, and it was like 10 o'clock that night. And I told her, I said, okay, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll come back tomorrow and I'll help you some more. And she said, okay. And then she called me in her office. And I walked into her office, and she had her checkbook out on her desk, and she said, I don't know what's going on with you, but God just told me to give you some money. And she wrote out a check, and I did not tell one single person about the $12 offering I made. Not one person. Nobody knew about that offering but God and me. I told no one what I needed or the offering I had made or what I was believing for. I didn't talk to anybody that day except her when I went to work, and I did not tell her what was going on. She didn't know if I needed money or didn't. She didn't know what was going on with me. And she wrote me out a check for over $1,200. So I dropped that offering in the mail that day, and I had that check in my hand that night, and deposited in the bank. And so I had the money to pay my rent, truck payment, and everything before it was even due. In all the time that I have walked with God, and I have tithed, He has consistently been faithful to do those kind of things. When I first moved to Dallas and started to look for an apartment, I didn't have the money to rent an apartment. I barely had the money to make the application fee. I was staying in an extended stay motel because I didn't know why He brought me to Dallas, and I was eating lunch on $5 a week. When my $5 ran out, I would pray and ask God to send someone by my desk to invite me to lunch that would pay for lunch. And every single time He did that. Not one time did He not answer that prayer. And I never told anyone else that I was doing that. I would just pray and ask Him. So when it came time to find an apartment, I started looking. I felt like He was saying, find an apartment, you're going to stay here. And I started looking in the third apartment complex I stopped at. When I set my foot out of my truck onto the ground, I knew that was where I was supposed to be. And so I looked at the apartment, and I got the application. I took it back the next day with the $35 application fee, and I prayed because I did not have the money for the deposit. It was like $200, I think, for the deposit, and I didn't even have $200. And I prayed, and I said, Lord, I know that's where You want me, but I don't have the money for the deposit. How am I going to rent that apartment? And I knew that He would take care of it because I knew that I was tithing. That's why I only had $5 a week to spend for lunch, because I was paying my tithes. And so I waited. They approved me for the apartment. And I said, okay, I'll be over there to bring the deposit. Well, I went to church that Sunday, and I was with two friends at church. They did not know anything about the apartment or anything that was going on or anything I was praying about. They just wanted to go see this church that I was going to, because it's a famous televangelist that I was attending at that time. After we walked out of church, we were walking through the parking lot. One of my friends turned to me and handed me an envelope and said, don't open this till you get home. And I looked at him and I said, what's going on? And he just said, God told me to give you that. Well, when I opened it later, it was a check for $200. It was the deposit for my apartment complex. My whole life, since I've been walking with God, is full of stories like this. Story after story after story. Things I have asked for, things I needed, even sometimes things that I just wanted, just really wanted. God has been faithful to answer. I have tried to keep up my end of the deal by being faithful to tithe. Tithing is something I highly recommend, and if you are in dire financial straits and you haven't tried it, I really recommend praying about it and seeking God about it, because God is just faithful. And it's not His desire for us to live in poverty and, not be able to pay our light bill or get kicked out of our house because we can't make our our rent or our house payment or our car payment. And if we obey him and we seek to put him first at all times, he will take care of us. We are his children. And so that's just the message I wanted to bring you tonight on tithing. You may think you can't afford to, but in my case and what I've seen with the tithe, I don't think I can afford not to. So it's something that I highly recommend. So God bless you, and thank you for watching.